of the next panel, which is called The Forest for the Trees, The Meanings of Data. And the moderator, Justin Fox, is an old friend and colleague of mine with Fortune, who's now the editorial director of the Harvard Business Review, and somebody who's had quite a long, extensive interest in this topic. And I'll let him introduce his panelists, who I think should all come on stage now. So Justin Fox and Data Panel, take it away.
Where are you going to sit?
I think you're sitting over
Okay,
there
very
on
good.
the far left.
That was a great talk.
Thank you, thank you.
Great talk.
I'll make sure you get a copy.
I love that this is the data panel, and here's Rick and I with our little book. Well, him with his big book and I with my little book. You've met Rick already. The other panelists we have here, first of all, to my left, Lars, and he says in the US, everybody just calls him Bjork, but I want him to say it in Swedish.
Björk.
There you go. Lars is CEO of ClickTech. Gil Elbaz, is it said any different anywhere else?
You said it perfectly.
CEO and founder of Factual. Vivek Ranadive, how do you score that one? Okay.
Perfect.
CEO and founder of Tibco. And we all have different ways of sort of understanding big and complex things. For some, it's visually. For me, it's always, I want to know the history. And since I'm the moderator, humor me for a minute or two here. I'm going to start with you, Vivek. It's 1986. How you start a company that gets you into this whole data world. What was going on? What problem were you trying to solve?
Well, I came up with this notion of a software bus, and we were kind of the first big data company. And at that point in time, the place where people made money from big data was on trading floors. And so I was trying to allow people on Wall Street to capture large amounts of data and find patterns in that data and hopefully make money from finding those patterns. So that's kind of where it all started for me.
And just what's the software bus? I know half the crowd will know this, but
Right. So the way that software was built in the old days is every time you built an application, you built bridges to connect applications and systems together. So if you had n systems, you had basically n squared back and forth bridges to make it connect. And if you look at, I'm a hardware engineer, and if you look at your computer or take the top of your PC, there's a backplane or a bus, and you plug cards into it, and through a single interface, things can communicate. So I created the software version of that, where you could tie systems and applications together through a single software backplane. And so that was kind of the way that you could move large amounts of data in real time and get that data to the right place.
Lars, ClickTech, you weren't there in the beginning, but its beginnings, it was across the street from AstraZeneca in Stockholm, and so it started doing what exactly for the pharma industry?
So the whole idea behind ClickView, which is a piece of software that we developed over the last 20 years, is that what if you put all your emphasis on the user of the software? We're sitting here today, great conference. Thank you, David, for hosting us here and the team. We talk about consumerization, we talk about mobility, we talk about convenience. But I think we need to step back and look, that's not been the case for a lot of people, and I still don't think it's the case. So the whole idea behind ClickView was, what if we put all the emphasis on the user of the software? All the other things that happen behind the scenes is not really relevant to them. You hardly open the hood of a car nowadays. You just make sure that you know how to drive it and you like it. But there was two things that went into developing ClickView. The first one was, what if you make a piece of software that works the same way as your brain works? And brains don't work in hierarchies, which a lot of softwares in this space have been. Your brain works associatively. As I sit here and speak, you might form the next question in your head. So we built the software around that. And the other piece of interesting is that human beings have a very easy way of recognizing colors as patterns in a data set or an information set. And that's built into ClickView too. We call it the power of gray. There are three colors you have to remember. You click on something, you make a selection, it turns green. Everything that's associated to that turns white. The green comes from the stoplight. And then everything that's not associated to what you selected is also shown. And that's what's grayed out, which we're used to from drop-down menus in so many other types of software. So that was the going-in assumption around ClickView.
Colors. So, Gil, you were a database engineer in the day, and then you and a college friend started the company with the awesome name of Oingo. What was that about?
Well, it started out with an interest in understanding information and seeing how there was a wealth of the web. It was 1998 when we started thinking about this, and information was just exploding. And there were different avenues toward organizing this. You saw the Yahoo directory, and you saw the search engine, and these were different sides of the same spectrum. And so we were interested in figuring out how can we automatically process unstructured information. So we had to take a crash course on natural language processing, and that kind of got me interested in data and algorithms.
And so you were initially sort of thinking you were in the search space?
We did. We
And
thought
then-
we were in the search space. We thought that the more you can automatically understand a page of text, the better you'll be positioned to do search.
So how did that lead to developing this thing called AdSense?
So I'm definitely a fan of the business strategy known as the pivot. So we had to pivot. I was friendly with some of the Google folks, and they were gaining steam faster than we were. Nobody was using Oingo search. But what we realized that we could apply the same technology, and that it turned out that understanding a page of text was critical to what became known as contextual ads, and we created a product called AdSense. Eventually then became part of Google.
And yeah, in between you got rid of the Oingo name. Why was that?
It was 2002, and we started moving into selling this page categorization technology to large newspapers like USA Today. Somehow then the name Oingo just didn't feel like the right marketing vehicle. So applied semantics became,
Excellent.
yeah.
Okay, that was the history. You've humored me. Thank you. It's now. Why are we all sudden? I mean, it's not suddenly, but it's definitely the last year, two. It's this big data moment. And Rick, I'll start with you. Why? I mean, other than that, you talked to some people at EMC, and some people at EMC talked to you and funded a book. But I mean, clearly you thought that this was an interesting moment.
You know, when I started hearing about all this, I sort of live in the world of analogies, as you all probably gathered. It's a way for me just to take very complex things and understand them better. And it's almost like, imagine if you touch your finger to the stove, and it wasn't until 6 months later that you knew the stove just burnt your finger. A million other things happen in between those two data points. It seems like this is the first time in human history where we've had the ability to basically, touch our finger to the stove and get the information while our finger's still on the stove. I think the impact, the implications of that are so dramatic, and it's so much of our information. See, it's almost like you're about to cross the street and your knowledge of where the cars are is 5 minutes out of date. That's incredibly dangerous. Well, what if it's 6 months or 6 years out, or completely wrong? So that cause and effect is suddenly getting connected in a way that I think it's just the right tool at the right time to help us address these enormous problems that we're facing as a species. That all sounds very grandiose, but what we were trying to do in this project was try to look at little early indicators of that across this whole spectrum of human behavior where, wow, I've never thought, it's so obvious when you see it, but we haven't had this ability, or it hasn't been affordable or technologically possible. I mean, the internet needed to be there before any of this would work. And we all thought, the internet's like, it is incredible, but Esther Dyson was telling me that was just one stage, that this is so much bigger now, what we're about to see.
I just wanted to completely agree with all of that, because I think that when you can connect real-time information with historical, and you can find patterns, then you can, and I wrote a book about this called The 2-Second Advantage, where a little bit of the right information beforehand is more valuable than all the information in the world 6 months after. And so I want to make you the offer before you leave the aisle of the store, not 6 months after you leave the store. What's the point of knowing that fraud is going to be committed after you've lost the money? So if you can connect up real-time events with historical patterns, then you can take advantage of opportunities or prevent threats. And so I think that is really the turning point.
Well, and Vivek was up here on this stage last year talking about this book, and I remember sitting in the back row at one point just going, because he was talking in such forceful terms about how great this was and how we had so much data now that we didn't need science anymore. We didn't need the scientific method. We could just look at what had happened and we'd know the future. Did you really mean that?
Well, I was exaggerating a little bit to make the point, but even since I said that, there's all kinds of examples of that. And so I like to say that math is starting to trump science, and that you don't really need to know the the what, the why, you just need to know the what. Like if A and B happen, then C will happen. So for years, AIDS researchers were trying to find how the AIDS virus mutated, and they couldn't. So then about a year ago, they converted it into a math problem, put it into a game called Fold It, and within 1 week, gamers had found the solution to the problem. On a simpler level, I have a customer and big retailer in Europe. They were trying to find who was using fraudulent credit cards. And they tried and they tried and they tried and they couldn't. And they came to us and we found a very simple pattern. If you buy champagne, razor blades, and diapers, it's probably a stolen credit card. Now, you can go back and try to explain it and say, well, why? You say, well, it makes sense because champagne, razor blades, big ticket items, easy to pawn off. Well, then why diapers? Well, actually, diapers are easy to pawn off too, and the guy was trying to look like he's a dad, he's a good guy, he's probably not using a stolen credit card. So there's all kinds of examples of this.
But there, now you have a theory.
Where,
You're doing science.
well, after the fact.
Okay.
After the fact. Like, there's no way that I could have sat down and figured
Right.
out that this was a stolen credit card. You found the pattern the way that Lars was describing it. You look at the data and you find the pattern.
Well, yeah, you must be seeing that in your.
Yeah, we have a great story. You all remember the tragic incident, not this past summer, the previous summer in Norway, where a lunatic killed almost 90 people. The year before, there was a similar story in Sweden, and a sniper was out shooting at people randomly. At least that's what people believed and the police believed. And police is a customer to us in Sweden. So by using enormous amounts of information from 10 years of records and client database, whatever their client is, criminals, they managed to pull together and see that pattern in the data set in 30 minutes, or would otherwise have taken them 3 months to do. And they nailed the guy, and he's been prosecuted, put away for life. And the whole story was, I was back home in Sweden at that time. He was randomly shooting at colored people, immigrants, but if you're there in November, everyone looks dark walking outside. So it was a pretty scary moment. And they attribute all of this to the fact that by technology, in this case QlikView, you could see the forest for the trees.
And it was
I thought it was a lady with a dragon tattoo that figured that out.
She didn't work for the police.
So this was all data that the police was already collecting, and it was a matter of bringing it together.
Absolutely.
Which sort of brings me, because Gil, you're involved in like one of the world's great fishing expeditions, it seems like, at Factual. Going out there, I mean, describe it to me a little, like a day in the life of your company, going out and finding another data source to plumb, or...
So certainly the framework that I live in is that the key thing, the key opportunity is better decisions. And increasingly, these better decisions are automated. They're happening in real time, as Vivek mentioned, in under 2 seconds. And when it comes, take an example like display advertising, a lot of times these decisions have to be made in 10 to 50 milliseconds. Now, what we're seeing is that these automated systems, we're trusting them with more and more of our lives. And the more data that you have, the better the model that you will be able to build. There's been a lot of discussions around, what's more important, is it the data or the algorithm? And time again, of course, the algorithm is important, but usually whoever has the most data will win. So Factual, one of the things we do, why we're getting interest, is we can provide additional data in certain verticals, specifically places and product data. And our customers use this to enrich their own data in order to build even better business intelligence, better predictive modeling.
Tie that on to what I talked about the police. That's exactly what they do now. So by combining people information and geospatial information, they can predict up to 90% when and what crime is going to happen in certain territories of their client base.
we've just been through this financial crisis, though, where one of the big things that happened was a lot of people believing that past patterns in mortgage markets would continue to repeat themselves. And whenever I think about this topic, there's this famous paper by David Lineweber, who's at Lawrence Livermore Labs, where he found the best correlation for S&P 500 performance from 1983 through 1993 was the price of butter in Bangladesh. So I'm just kind of curious, obviously it's this constant, how do you fight that? How do you sift through, and any of you can take that on, but.
Well, I think that there's patterns, and you can combine those with real-time events. And one of the things one of my pet peeves, and I've written papers on this subject, is just the way the Fed runs. And I've advocated, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but quite seriously, that we need to replace those old guys with a computer program. Because the world is, as you said, running in real time. So when you put your hand on the stove, you know it. It doesn't take 3 months to know it. But for the Fed, it takes 3 months to know it. So with my software today, you know if there's a store that's not selling shoes, you know it right away, and the factory in China knows that. Now what the Fed does, their job is to keep things comfortable. And if you kept your house comfortable the way they do, then every 3 months, you would turn the heater on and off. And you'd continuously be overheating and underheating your house, which is what they have done in the economy, and they've only had one so-called soft landing since World War II. So what we really need is to move to a real-time world where you're able to look at data, make tiny adjustments, and keep a closed loop going.
I guess the issue with the closed loop and a really big thing like the economy is I think on a month-to-month basis, I get that. What about moments where the paradigm shifts, as it sort of has with the Fed over the last 5 years? For 25 years, their job was, we got to keep inflation below a certain amount. And then they've taken this leap of faith over the past 2 or 3 years, and it seems like the data as it comes in is starting to back them up, that by looking back at a much farther back data set, the 1930s, actually that was the wrong, we shouldn't be sitting here focused just on inflation. I mean, how do you get those two to work together? Because I get the thermostat analogy.
The data now exists, and you can get it in real time. And you can set the parameters that you want, and you can keep making adjustments continuously. So if you see something that's falling outside the band of what you want to achieve, you can adjust it. And if you make a mistake, that's okay, because you adjust it very quickly. And I believe that's how the future will work. That's how you fly a Boeing 747 or a Boeing 777. It's a closed loop mechanism. You're making adjustments, and it's about the data.
Lars, you want to?
No, I would agree with that. No model is perfect, and it's never going to be finished. So you're going to add data streams, and you're going to filter out things. I think an important thing in this big data discussion is most of the information for you at that point is noise. So how do you filter out the stuff that's not relevant to the decision you want to make right now? That's equally important.
I think transparency is also part of the story. I mean, I don't think mainstream media covered the degree to which these loan applications were changing character dramatically during this period of time. And I think there's always going to be those that say, well, you can't have these workflows be transparent because of all the privacy issues. But there's always ways if you care about it and if you want there to be transparency.
Right, and there were a lot of people in those transactions who didn't want them to be all that transparent. So, and that sort of, but this is bringing me to this thought of like, where is the balance in thinking about big data between, and thinking about how to get useful things out of it, between actual domain expertise in medicine or whatever else, and just being a good data scientist? And first of all, Rick, I mean, you've been out there looking at all of these different things. How many of them are the coolest things coming from people who are already in the field and went looking, how can data help me? Or was it much more people who were just into the data and cool stuff started to show up?
I was thinking before, no one's actually asked me this, but I was thinking if someone said if there was one story in the whole book, in the whole project that you sort of learned about that kind of like, they have this great expression in Australia, gobsmacked, where you kind of go, like, wow. I heard Francis Collins from the NIH talking at TED-Med last year, and he was talking about the fact that drug companies spend billions of dollars looking for cures for some of the biggest diseases facing humanity. And along the way, as they test these drugs, they get to a point where they do clinical trials. And then unfortunately, very often, some of these drugs have serious harmful or deadly side effects. And so 0.0001% of the people taking this drug will die, therefore the drug's never released. And one of the points he was making is that now, because we're able to actually do genetic sequencing, right, and decode individual DNA at a level that's soon going to be pretty affordable. He's saying in 5 years, you go to your local drugstore, and for $40, they'll basically tell you which drugs will work for you and which ones won't. The fact that all these drugs potentially are sitting there on the shelves gathering dust that could save millions of lives, to me that was one of the most dramatic things that I saw. I don't know how you tell that story in photographs, but when I think about the potential of that alone, to take this unlocked resource and because of big data, being able to go in and give each of us an individual blueprint about what will work and what won't for us, that's just stunning to me.
We're already doing a lot of that both with drugs, where basically they're using our analytic tools to find out what kinds of drugs will work on what kinds of people and in what combinations.
Yeah.
And we also now have the state of California doing that, where they look at every person born, and based on their genetics and their ethnic background, they can determine in advance. So we're getting to a point where we're going to have extremely personalized medicine.
Right.
And the state of California is already doing that with a lot of our software. So we're fast approaching that point.
I just think it's really exciting. I mean, I think there's a scary part about all this too. Is this whole idea of being tracked. I mean, if somebody 10 years ago, had said to Gil and said, could I plant a tracking device on you so I would know where you were every moment of the day, 24 hours a day, who you were with, what you bought? I mean, all of us would have said, are you kidding? No way. And now we line up and pay $800 and wait for hours to implant the new. I mean, I love my iPhone. I'm not complaining about it, but this idea that we're now comfortable with this idea of that you can't unplug anymore, right?
Well, I think people, once they decide to opt in, then there's all kinds of value that flows through.
But that is the
It's both,
question,
double-edged
and I'm going to start with this one on Gil. Is just all this data that's out there. How do you, or should we think about ownership? Who owns it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certainly ownership is important. The dimension of it that I think is very important is, from a business standpoint, is how much of it do you want to own? Too often, a company sees all of their data as their asset, but it turns out that ownership comes with a price. In many cases, that's a price of huge costs for maintenance. And if you're spending a lot on maintenance, and also, by the way, this data isn't unique, other people have similar data, and that data isn't differentiated, you should outsource it. You can do that in software. We've learned you can do that in two main ways. You can get involved in something open source. You can license, outsource to third-party software developers. I don't see that happening enough in data, where people examine their data, decide I'm going to differentiate here, put my resources here, just get rid of it, get rid of the ownership.
Well, and it's because I was thinking of it. That's from the side of the companies gathering this data. But what about the person with the iPhone who's being tracked everywhere? I mean, there have been interesting, there are the privacy zealots who think this is all horrible. There's this interesting middle ground of people like Doc Searls who are pushing this idea that, if somebody can collect stuff about me that turns out to be really useful, that's great, but shouldn't it be my decision? Shouldn't I own it?
I think a contrarian view would be that people will make a living in the future just selling their data exhaust. I think that's a direction we'll get to.
I could go for that.
I threw out an idea at one conference where it's a pity people proactively will make sure that they're donating their body to science, but their body of data is probably worth much more to the health community.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think
There was a gentleman in one of the photographs, and I skipped over the picture, but it's a picture of a guy sitting there with a computer in front of him showing his chest and data coming out of it. He actually has a defibrillator, and it actually transmits wirelessly to his doctor throughout the day. And so he wanted to correlate his exercise and his diet with when his defibrillator kicked in. So he called the company and said, could I get a copy of all the data of my heart over the last 6 months? And they said, sorry, that's our data, it's not yours. And he goes, wait. This is my heart, you're collecting the data. So, I mean, but it really poses, everyone is now, they're making money off of our data. I mean, it seems like we need to have a discussion about the idea that, I at least want to be able to opt in, and maybe if I got 10% of what Google's selling my browser history for, I'd be happy with it. But the fact that everyone else is trading in our data except for us, and we have no control over it, That's sort of unsettling, especially as it looks like data is becoming more and more valuable and important.
You did opt in. You just didn't read the,
I didn't read
the
it.
terms of service.
The 12-page.
Yeah, because it's only 12
right.
pages, and yeah. You
Yeah.
wanna- I would love to go pretty soon to comments and questions from the audience, just because I think on this topic, a lot of you folks out there are going to have much smarter things to ask than me. There's somebody over there with Mike. I'll go ahead and who's got her hand up. Well, there are lots of people with hands up. Well, let's just. Okay, we'll go here because he's got the first mic.
Stephen Sprague, Wave Systems. So I think one of the really interesting questions in big data comes to the context of ownership and also integrity. The security conversation around this is not discussed enough. We think of it in the context of Big Brother, but the question is, how can this data be used maliciously? And we have so many fantastic examples where people have manipulated Google search results would be a perfect example, in order to create economic benefit. And then if all of a sudden we automate all the systems, the concept of integrity and security and control, and when do I pull the plug when it looks like it's going out of control? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think Vivek gets that one first.
Yeah, I think, I am sympathetic to what you're saying, but I think that, we will find our way around all these things. I remember 10 or 15 years ago, I was having lunch with somebody, and they said nobody would ever buy anything on the web. And then after we finished lunch, they took their credit card and gave it to the waiter. And I was like, wait, you just gave your credit card to some person that you don't know. You went off to the back room somewhere. And so I see it the same way. I just see that we will get past, those are all issues, but I think we'll get past them.
That's the first hand I saw, so I think that gets something.
Jody Westby, Global Cyber Risk. One of the things that I do is work with engineering teams about legal issues in the development of products. And I'm a little troubled knowing the variety of privacy laws around the globe and the disparities between them, that we're so cavalierly talking about big data in ways that's cool, in ways that it's products, but not thinking about, when you go to the ownership question, skipping over it to the fact that this is data about real people that have legal protections that are being enforced by protection authorities all around the world.
And which is a similar, but I mean, you based in.
No, I think you raised, as Vivek said before, I think you raised a question that is very, very valid, and we probably don't have an answer to it. But I think we need to bring it back too. You're touching on one point of big data. Most of the things that we solve in this area has nothing to do with personalized information. Most people don't even have access to relevant data in their day-to-day life to make a good decision. I'm not shying away from your question. I think it's a very important one, and there needs to be a lot of people at the table to discuss this one, including regulators, I think at least. But we will figure it out in some way.
I mean, we haven't yet seen the groundswell of consumer concern here, and when we do, tools will address this. I mean, today people don't read their privacy policies and they don't ask other people for help examining those privacy policies, and at some point, when enough people have been burned, that will become the norm, and things will be improved.
And also the new generation is actually much more comfortable with this than older generations are.
Or they're happily unaware.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're aware. I just think that, that's just kind of their way of life.
The other thing is that you see over and over again is people are concerned about privacy, and I am, and then but you're offered something convenient, and it's amazing how quickly people will give up their privacy. I mean, I use Facebook Connect, and it says, you agree to let me post as you. So wait, I'm agreeing to let you post things on my Facebook page as if you're me. And I say, yeah, because I don't want to spend 5 minutes filling out a form. So I know it's stupid, and I agree with your concerns. My worry is that people are not having this conversation right now. By the time we have it, there'll be things set in stone. And that's, again, one of the things we were trying to do. There's a whole chapter in the book called The Dark Side of Data, which is talking about some of the more troubling aspects of all this. I mean, maybe in the United States, we don't worry that much about who knows where we are and what our data is being used for, but there's places in the world where it could be incredibly dangerous if a government knew where everybody was all the time. There's lots of places
But I would
where we
also
wouldn't
say
want
that for every one of those, there's 10 where it can be used for good.
I think the
so-
vast majority is good, but I think we
Yeah.
do have to think about the bad before it gets sort of ahead of us.
Right.
Yep. Who's got it? All right.
Frank Spicer from Social Flow. Basically, we've gotten here through some sort of consensual, contractual revolution. So we've opted in because it's been convenient. We've gotten what we want. But to your point, I don't know if a government fix is in order because we got here by a bunch of individuals opting in. Doesn't the rise of big data and this privacy problem actually, by economic law, give us a situation where there's a market for big obstruction? Isn't there an antithesis to the contractual opt-in that people will start to pay for when they start to feel the pain of opting in?
So like a business model for companies that come in to, I don't know, what would their role be?
Or some sort of open source style revolution to break away from it.
I mean, there's all sorts of things there are technologies out there. There's personal.com. It's a personal data locker where you have complete control of the information. And once it's there, they're guaranteeing that you get to authorize any third party that uses it. But these things are, they're emerging, but they're a little complicated, and we have to really want them. We have to want to go to build another network together that emphasizes greater control.
Well, I have a basketball team, and I launched some applications for my team. And once you opt into the fan zone, then I basically know everything about you. And if you're sitting in my
Everything
arena-
about you, total everything about you when you're at Oracle Arena.
Well, when you're at Oracle Arena and beyond, like I know what your household looks like, I know what you like, what you don't like. I even pick up, if you're sitting there and you tweet that you're pissed off because you had cold pizza, and this is a real example, I know it. So I make it up to you. I know that, you like it when the Lakers are in town. You have kids, there's a game. I have extra VIP parking. I'll make it up to you. But you opted in, and you want the goodies. You want the good deals, the good offers. You're getting something in return.
And what does the opt-in look like? Just right at the beginning?
Yeah, there's a fan zone, and there's, it's kind of like being in a hotel. You come into the lobby, and there's a lot of good free stuff, the ambiance, the chandeliers, the music. But then if you want to opt in, then you go into the fan zone, where you give us your email, and we know who you are. And at that point, it's like going to the special room for the VIPs. And at that point, you can get special offers, you can get special content, you can be interacting with the players, and people are choosing to do that. They want the good stuff. Yeah.
I guess, I don't know who's right here.
Hi, Mickey McManus from Maya. So it seems we're at 6 or 7 billion cell phones. Everyone's talking about mobile is the new revolution. It's amazing. Sensors and connectivity. And yet analysts are saying we're going to have trillions of devices in the next 5 years, which is just a lot different than 5 or 6 billion. How will big data change when all atoms and bits are connected, or when a lot more of them are connected? What will happen then?
Well, I think we have the potential to make the world a really amazing place. I think we can eliminate airplane crashes. We can eliminate drought. We can eliminate disease. We can eliminate. I think I started my company with the notion that if you get the right information to the right place at the right time and you put it in the right context, then you can make the world a better place. Your lawn will know where the water needs to go because there's a sensor that will tell you that this is dry. So you have the potential to create a truly amazing world. And a lot of the data you're right, it'll be coming not from people, but from things.
There's got to be a dystopian version of that future, though, too. And this probably is the wrong panel to ask about it.
Well, I think, things like airplane crashes, that plane that crashed off the coast of Brazil, all of that data was available that would have told you that was a faulty sensor. Didn't have to happen. Pandemics, we can prevent them. Power outages, a lot of them can be prevented.
Got somebody back here.
Hello, Steve Collins from Valid. we've heard that the amount of data and the sort of technological revolution has increased exponentially in the last 10 years. At the same time, there's more malnourished in the world than there were 10 years ago, and even actually a lot of countries have this equivalent proportion of malnourished. So what I'm hearing is that, yeah, this great big data and all this technology is a tool, but it's insufficient by itself. We've actually got to have models to apply it to the welfare of poor people. It won't just happen by itself. What's your perspective on that?
So I agree with you. One of the efforts that we put out is a big corporate social responsibility program. So any organization in the world that want to help the less fortunate ones get our software for free, because we've set out a target. Not only will we want to drive sales to a certain level, we want to touch the lives of 1 billion people in some way. And we recognize not everyone is going to have a mobile phone and maybe have access to the software, but they can still be beneficiary of it through another organization. And I'm not sure your stats are right. Do we actually have more malnutrition in the world? That's not what my fellow Swede Hans Rosling is saying. Okay.
Well, I think that, I agree with Lars that with data, we have the potential, and we're working with people like the World Economic Forum to eliminate food shortages, because a lot of it has to do with distribution, it has to do with data. It is a little bit of a big data problem, and so we think that the potential exists to eliminate a lot of those problems. And I agree with you, we've spent a lot of money on technology, and now you know what Shaq had for lunch, and you still have food shortages, you still have airplane crashes.
How can that be?
You still have disease.
When we know what Shaq ate for lunch, why can't we send a man to Mars?
Now there's just one quick comment about that. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of data out there. The reality is, though, the entrepreneur that could be inspired to solve that problem probably does not have access to the data that they need to solve it.
Yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah.
There's a question back there.
Andrew Roche from Personal Democracy Media. I want to return quickly to what Rick mentioned, because I think it's really important. How many people in this audience have actually read the terms of service all the way through before you actually got your service or your device?
Nobody.
We got somebody right here.
Yeah, okay. So, so one of the big problems is that the language is not only written by lawyers who were trained in the 20th century, but the language is so archaic that we don't even understand what it means. So imagine a site where you had basically beforeyouagree.com, where you could actually put up terms of service, people could crowdsource turning that language into a language that people could understand, so that we could actually take more personal responsibility for our role in the big data revolution and maybe take our data back.
I think you have a great business idea there, absolutely.
Yeah. And Richard Thaler, the economist, calls this choice engines, that this idea that there's a big business opportunity out there for a middleman, basically, between consumers and all of these people who want our data. And to me, it's immediately very attractive, because then there'd be actually someone with an incentive to make these things clear. But did we have another one? We just got a couple minutes left here. Up in the front row here.
Thank you. Peter Van from Swift. Most of the discussions are about big data, are about big organizations sitting on mounts of lots of data. I would like to hear your view on what happens with small data when we evolve towards a world where there's much more peer-to-peer communication between individuals and even devices. What happens then?
Anybody want?
Well, I think.
Want to try that? Or?
So there's many problems in data, and big is the one that seems to have its day right now. But there are, when people are asked the definition for big data, I think the popular the description is around not just volume, but also variability and velocity. So there are those two other issues, variability in terms of the structure. So even when you're talking about small data, if you can't automate pattern matching and figure out some way to extract some sort of common structure from the data, and if it's happening at real time and you need to be able to react, those are equally important in this day.
Well, and I'm also just curious with all three of you, are you finding that especially Vivek and Lars, that your business has started dealing with really big corporate clients and have moved down to smaller?
No, we started at the other end.
Okay.
Because big data, again, is it a relative term or is it an absolute term? For most people, it's a relative term. It's big to them. And that's what we deal with. With having 26,000 customers, there isn't that many Fortune 500 companies, let's be honest. That's why they're called Fortune 500.
That's what that was about.
Yeah. So we deal with a lot of small and medium-sized companies with exactly that challenge. How do we make it relevant and easy for them to access data? That's why the big data discussion needs to be put in some kind of perspective. They still don't have access to that. It might be small data in the total scheme.
I have to wind this up now. Thank you all very much for the great questions. Thank you, panel. And David, are you coming back up, or what's the plan?
I'm coming back up.
All right. Thank you, panel. Let's give them a hand.